Hi, I'm Emily from Life So Savory, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute drawstring bag. It's perfect for traveling. You can store your makeup or anything else that you need to while you're on the go. The greatest thing is you can make it in any size that you want. So I have this cute little one here, and I'm just going to show you the inside before we make a slightly bigger one in our tutorial today. So you can see that if you pull the drawstrings, you can open it up, you can have the sides up a little bit, or you could open it completely flat. You can add pockets or elastic, whatever you want inside to be able to keep all of your things organized. So let's make one here. So I've already pre-cut the lining. It is a double folded circle cut 10 inches, and I'm going to show you on this one, but I also have pre-ironed on a bit of interfacing. And you want to do that just to give it a little bit of structure, as you can see here. So I also wanted to make sure that the interfacing is not on the edges so that our drawstring can slide easily through as we get to that part. So we'll set this one to the side, and we're going to cut the second circle of the main piece of fabric now. So I've taken a square of fabric and I've put it on a double fold, meaning that here in the corner I have a nice double fold there, and then I have raw edges around. So I'm going to mark it 10 inches because that's the size that I made this one. But again, you can make it in any size that you want. I've seen even large ones for like Lego storage or other things like that. So it's a great versatile tutorial that you can use for anything you want. So from the double folded corner, we're going to mark our 10 inches all the way around on our fabric. And then we can easily cut that to create a circle. So I'm just going to give a couple marks around using my measuring tape. If you have a different method for cutting a circle that you prefer, of course, you can go ahead and use that. We're just trying to go ahead and get a nice circle shape going. Okay, so once we have that marked, then we're going to cut it out. Okay, so we're cutting our 10-inch circle. If you're cutting the interfacing, I would say to cut it at least an inch smaller. So my interfacing circle would probably be closer to 8.5 or 9 inches as I was cutting that out. All right, so now we have two pieces of fabric the same size, and we're going to put them right sides together and put a few pins just to keep everything in place while we go ahead and sew these together. So I'm going to line it up. And then I'm just going to put a couple pins to keep it in place. So you can do as many or as few as you are comfortable with, whatever is easiest for you when you're sewing. I don't like to pin a lot, so I often will get away with as many as pins as possible. Okay, so we're going to go sew these together and then we'll continue. So I'm just stitching this to turn right side out. So you could use whatever seam allowance is more comfortable for you. I'm just going to kind of use the edge of the presser foot as my guide and sew all the way around the circle. When you're almost all the way around, you want to make sure that you leave a several inch opening in order to turn this right side out. So I'm going to leave 5 or 6 inches here as an opening, and then we'll be able to turn the fabric before we continue. Okay, so now I have the fabric together with an opening for turning. We can go ahead and remove the pins and turn it right side out. Depending on how wide you made your seam allowance, you may want to clip the curves in order to get it to lay nicely, but my seam allowance was fairly narrow and my circle is quite large, so I'm not too worried about how it lays, but that's just one thing you might want to keep in mind. Okay, so now we need to close the opening, so I'm just going to lay the seam allowance inside and then put a few pins to keep it. We're also going to do a quick press of the outside of this circle so that everything lays nicely. Okay, so there I have the opening closed, and then let's just run this over the iron. So you just want to make sure that it's laying flat and you don't have any big folds or tucks in the fabric. You can see I'm not really making sure it's exact. We're just kind of getting a general feel for a nice flat circle edge. Okay, so then we have this, and we'll sew the opening closed, and we're also going to stitch all the way around the outside of the circle one more time, pretty close to the edge. So I would say this time I'm going to use between a 1/8 and a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we just want that to be stitched nice and close to the edge for our outer stitching. I'm also first going to close the opening where my pins are. So you'll see I'll kind of stop and start to go over the pins. Okay, so we're just closing that opening first. And then we're going to continue to stitch all the way around the outside of this circle. This will end up to be one side of our casing for the lacing, and it's also a nice top stitching to give the edge a little bit of structure. This time we're not turning, so we are going to sew all the way around and top stitch a little bit over our starting stitches. All right, so there's our outer side of the casing for the lacing, and now we're going to do that one more time, about 1 inch in from where we just sewed. So we'll lift our presser foot, and most machines will have a nice 1 inch mark. You can see right here on the machine it says it has a nice 1 in a line. And so as I'm sewing around, I'm going to try to keep the edge of the fabric on that 1 inch mark, which will give us a nice 1 inch approximately casing for our lacing. And again, we're going to go all the way around. We're not leaving any openings in our sewing. Okay, after we get back around to where we started, we do a little back stitch, and then we'll remove it from our machine, and let's go finish this project. All right, so now we have an inside and an outside to our project. If you wanted to add a pocket or elastic like I did on the smaller version, you would have wanted to do that before you sew your fabric together just on the lining. So ours will not have anything really on the inside. But what we are going to do now is we're going to add 2 little divots to be able to thread our lacing through the casing. And so what you want to do is just mark 2 opposite sides of your circle. So I'll just put a pin there, and then I'm going to put a pin here. Actually, I'm not even going to put a pin because I'm just going to cut this one. So what we want to do is we want to cut just through the top layer of fabric. So this gets a little bit tricky, but if you kind of pull the bottom out and once you get it started, it's pretty easy. So just make a little clip, and then you're going to cut a small circle big enough to put the rivet inside. Then you take your rivet and you slide it inside that hole that you just cut. The fabric should be all around the edge, and we just put the little tool underneath, put the top on, and then you're just going to set it with a small hammer. And then now we have one side of our casing finished. So we're just going to repeat that on the other side real quickly. So we'll cut one more small hole, only through one layer of the fabric, so you want to kind of pull that apart. And just cut a nice little circle. Okay, and then slide your rivet inside. I like to use the smaller side on the bottom. I feel like it's just a little bit easier to get it in and get the fabric around it. And sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. But, okay, and then we put our piece underneath, put our fabric on top, or our other part of our rivet on top, and then set it. All right, so now we have our casing is created and we can thread the lacing. So you can create lacing out of fabric, or I'm just using a double fold bias tape, and we're just going to approximately get our size that we need. You can always cut it a little bit shorter later. And I'm using a large safety pin to thread it through the casing. So we just put it inside one rivet. We're going to go all the way around the casing and then come out the other side, because we're going to put in two lacings to create that drawstring effect. So we're just threading it through. This is why we made a nice wide casing to begin with, so that the safety pin can slide easily, and also it has a nice look at the end when you draw that casing up. Okay, so when you come back around, then you're going to want to bring your safety pin out that other side. Don't pull it through the other end. Okay, so make sure you can see both ends. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so if we did that on both sides, then you would take your little toggle and you would put both ends of your lacing through the toggle and then tie a knot, so that you just have, so it can't slide off as you're adjusting. And then you have a bag that you're able to lay flat, load up with all the things that you need to take with you, and then you just pull it closed. If you want it to be a little bit more secure, you can tie a bow on the ties, and you're ready to go. So an easy project that you can make in any size.